And thanks everybody for being here today. To echo what Scott said, I think Minister Shuvalov being here is a really important statement. It's not just symbolic, as you'll hear in the conversation we're going to have. I think there is real substance behind the meetings today and between the visit today. So thank you very much for being here today. I thought we'd start. I think most people who are here in the room are interested to hear that they're looking at Russia as an investment opportunity for them. Mm-hmm. So I think they'd like to hear directly from you, what is the climate like right now in your mind, and what are some of the trends that you're seeing? Let's start there.
Okay, first, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for setting Russia Day, and this is very important for us. And I think that you will carry on, and next year we will be hosted here again.
I hope.
Then climate. You know, people are complaining that the investment climate is not very positive at the moment, and that, you know, the rule of law needs to be changed for better, and many other things. But you know, just a few weeks ago, FIAC, that's Foreign Investments Advisory Council, which consists of 40 or 45 more, you know, major companies in Russia. They've been working with the Russian government for 20 years now. They hired independent consultants and advisors, and they presented the report to the Russian government, how foreign investors see what's happening in Russia, what kind of, you know, climate or atmosphere we can provide for investors, and how they feel investing and doing business in Russia. And surprisingly, you know, Prime Minister Putin, Prime Minister Medvedev, when he was a president, he started speaking very loudly about climate, you know, business climate, that we need to change it, that, you know, investors are complaining and we need to be focused on it. And he, you know, he is very pushy. And then while this meeting, the foreign investors were presenting this report. Mm-hmm. And they said, you know, they explored the period from 2007 to 2012. And existing investors consider my country as more positive than 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they would invest now dramatically more than before. And, you know, this is a very good report. If you read it, and it's very simple, and you understand that there are still the problems we face, and we are trying to work on, like bureaucracy, corruption, rule of law, and they, you know, they notice that it's the same level of burden for them. Mm-hmm. But besides it, a lot of improvements. So, you know, we understand that it's not very comfortable for those who didn't invest, who accept my country only via mass media, and we understand the problem. And if you read here the papers and watch TV, you will understand that Russia is something you wouldn't even, you know, go for just to visit, not to invest. But in reality, if you ask people who are working in Russia, they admit that, you know, there's, you know, much more convenient place and comfortable place to invest than, you know, people imagine here. Yeah. So, you know, there are two different Russias. Image of bad Russia for those who never invested, and a different Russia which is changing, positively changing for those who are present there on our market. And we are welcome newcomers, so please come over and invest, and I hope you'll get profits.
And it seems that you and Mr. Putin and Mr. Medvedev are also very committed to the trend you just talked about in the last 5 years continuing. So talk to the group about some of the other measures you would see the government taking in the coming years to continue to make it an even more comfortable place to invest.
Okay, but we always start with macroeconomics. And if you look at the debt level and inflation rate and our reserves, I think I wouldn't, maybe that's not modest, but I would say that we are maybe holding the best position at the moment, right, with as the safest place to invest. And if you compare us with European Union or with even American market and Europe statistics, we feel much safer. Right. So if people come over and invest, we understand what's going on with the exchange rate and how the exchange rate changes depending on oil prices, and how we use our reserves in case commodities drop down with their prices. So now everything is pretty clear and transparent. Then, again, rule of law. We're still complaining about our courts and arbitrations, but if you compare what was in Russia and how you could defend your rights 10 years ago and now, it's still not easy. You need to play with different rules, and you will need to pay a lot to lawyers, but ultimately you can defend your rights, maybe using the next level of appeal or something, but people notice that there are changes for better. So we understand it's still a problem to protect your property right, but there are changes. Then we provide more support for smaller and medium-sized enterprises by different programs, and we believe that in 2020 more than 50 employees will be working in Russia in smaller and medium-sized enterprises, which is very good for us, and we are dependent on bigger monopolies in the moment, and we understand how to change this. Yeah. We provide loans for them through Vneshekonom Bank, who is present here, and Mr. Dmitriev, the head of that bank, and we are working with different groups, and we are working with monopolies at the same time, and trying to push these companies to provide easier access for smaller enterprises for their budgets, because they're huge companies like Gazprom, railways, and others. Okay. So there are different steps to make investors, more confident that everything is changing in the right direction. We don't promise that overnight it'll be changed, immediately, and they will have the same conditions as, let's say, in the most prominent economies in Europe. But we understand our goals, and we want to impose the same standards as in, let's say, in Germany or other countries where it's very transparent and safe to invest.
Right, that's great. And I think what people are particularly pleased about is there doesn't seem to be any moving backwards either. So it's all moving forward, which is good, and the trends are getting better. So
that's always a problem when you see and observe political tensions on the high political level, and when you pass through different election campaigns, and people say something in Russia, then people say something in the United States. It's okay. Yeah. Just, but pragmatic people should understand how we will promote business rules and how we will support business people. So ultimately, I hope that two presidents, President Obama and President Putin, very soon they will meet and they will discuss real business issues, how to promote our mutual trade.
Yeah. We certainly know what you're talking about there. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Now historically, we talked a little bit about this at lunch. Historically, a lot of the direct investment has been into mining, oil and gas sectors, kind of the natural resource arena. We talked a lot at lunch about growing healthcare industry, et cetera. What other sectors do you see as the up-and-comers where you think that there will be good opportunities for foreign direct investment?
Frankly, that's a sad story that people want, foreigners, they want to come over and invest only in commodities. Yeah. There are so many possibilities. If you consider, we are a big market. The Russian market is 142 million people, 43 million people. But now we are building a single market with Kazakhstan and Belarus. So altogether we are 175 million people with the same, rule, without borders. Just you can set up an industry or, any subsidiary in Russia and then being able to sell your goods in Kazakhstan and Belarus. So it's much easier. Much easier. And so we have almost 200 million people market, and people consume every day. So you can invest, or people can invest in retail, telecommunications, local energy sector, not just exploring oil and gas, but we need to modernize local heating systems and providing electricity for just basic needs. local infrastructure, as I said, retail, will privatize many companies. I hope that, our post office as well, that's a huge company. Then we, we will, next year maybe we'll be very close to sell railways shares. Just, the biggest or the best shipping company in the world called Sovcomflot, and we will place the share here in New York Stock Exchange. And, so airports, seaports, river ports, and healthcare, education, private education, so many sectors. And only this year, fortunately, people noticed that they can invest in healthcare, sector, and the sector would be very profitable. I believe that education would be profitable as well, and if it is higher education, good quality, based maybe on joint programs with American universities and other schools, English, German, French, could be profitable as well. So Russia will develop, and once you develop the market, then all the sectors are developed, and that's not only oil and gas. Again, we need oil and gas, and we will provide oil and gas for global prosperity, I would say, but that's not necessarily that we mean that our further incomes and our development will be only through oil and gas.
Right. No, I think that's a great story, because there's lots of other sectors that appear to be affording opportunities. You mentioned a couple of the areas where the privatization plans might be focused. I think people in the room are interested to hear. Do you expect the privatization plans to be an important part of the agenda in the next 2, 3, 5 years? Is that going to be a real focus to get all the things you just mentioned done in the next few years?
Yeah, well, I think just, for this government, for this mandate, normally if everything goes well, the government will exist until next presidential elections. But, in our country, according to the constitution, the president can decide otherwise any day. But normally, it's until president's obligations expire in this term. So for this government, or the government under Dmitry Medvedev, it'll be one of the key points in his agenda. And he was promoting privatization when he was the president, and the first government meeting, he announced 7 key issues he would be interested in, and he noticed privatization. Last week, we had 6-month period when we need to provide first results to the public, and privatization was mentioned again. And we were able, for this period, to sell shares around, I think we gained now, we received around $10 billion for this period of time. So just, we won't be very quick. And we shouldn't. No. We need to speak with investors, with advisors, and once we understand who possible investors are, money we get, and then we will go forward. But so we will pursue this agenda, but there is no need for hurry.
Right. I think that's right. Now, we also all know that there's a lot of exciting things going on away from what we just talked about. You've got the Olympics in 2014. Yeah. You've got assuming the G20 presidency in 2013. How should we all think that Russia is going to think about its priorities as president of the G20?
In Mexico, we announced our priorities, and now the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Economic Development, they start working with the partners. I wouldn't say anything at this stage. I think for me, what is important when I speak with G20 Sherpa, which is Ksenia Yudaeva, and she comes from private business, and now she is the head of one of the most important divisions at Putin's administration. He will be dealing with all the national teams during our G20 presidency. We need to provide the agenda development through G20 and G8, because next year we're presiding in G20, and then 2014 G8. And yeah, I think the financial stability, financial regulations, regulators, and maybe IMF rules and others. So everything would be a very important agenda for us. But for the better result, it would be very important if we carry on while presiding in G8. Then we speak maybe deeper, in more detail, just in a shorter format. And this is very important. So this year we were presiding in APEC, which is very important as well, via Pacific. And it was a very interesting job and interesting project. So we are trying to just impose some continuity, and we need to to try to combine all major results in one picture. Otherwise, it will be just broken into different pieces. Yes.
And then the last question for you, just to go into a little more detail, and maybe we'll take a question or two from the audience as well. You mentioned something that's near and dear to our hearts, because we think it's the growth engine in every economy, which is how you look after your small and medium-sized enterprises, right? And you talked a little bit about asking some of the banks to lead lending programs, et cetera. Just a couple of more minutes on other initiatives that the government is taking to make sure that capital flows to those enterprises, because we think it's particularly important for Russia, as it is here in this country and really everywhere. That's the growth engine.
Okay, first we imposed lower taxation for small enterprises. So they don't pay that high tax. Our companies don't pay that high tax. So the average taxation is around 35% in their businesses. For small enterprises, we lowered. And unfortunately, we cannot reduce their social payments, social tax at the moment. But they complain and say at the moment, 5 years ago, they were saying that bureaucracy was #1 target. Now they say social tax. And they want us to reduce it. But at the same time, people are talking about healthcare system, pension rights and everything. So we need to find a proper balance. Until we do this, we cannot reduce the tax. But so the general taxation is lower. Then they don't pay VAT if they decide otherwise. It's their decision which taxation to use. Then we adopted a law, unfortunately, which is not applied fully, which provides that budgetary expenditures and expenditures for monopolies, at least 1/5 of their budgets should be disbursed between small enterprises. And we're trying to impose this via federal budget and regional budgets. But when we look at our giants like Gazprom, railways, other companies, I wouldn't say that we achieved that goal. We have something ahead of us. We need to work on it. And loans. Even if I mentioned 7% inflation rate, if you go to the Russian bank, you'll get a loan. Fortunately, maybe you will get interest rate of 12%, which is very high for small enterprises. And we back them via Внешэкономбанk subsidiary and regional funds which support small enterprises. And along with that, we provide premises, offices, which they occupy historically. They can buy them out using, special formula, which is not market price. It's a price which is calculated based on a certain formula. And then, again, with all the difficulties, because it's local bureaucracy and so on, but people can get those promises in their, private possession. Licensing, we just abolished licensing, and we still have licensing only for 30 types of activities, I think. Most of small enterprises' interests now organized by patent. And so it's easy, you go into the local authority and buy patents, and that's it.
Right.
So we are doing, there is a roadmap, and we follow, sometimes with, very good success, sometimes, it's not that good. But again, now 33% of our population consider themselves as middle-class people.
That's a big change.
And we want, as I said, by 2020 to have more than 50%. And we understand that most of those people would be employed by small and medium-sized enterprises.
Right. Well, as you said in the lunch, I mean, with per capita GDP having grown tenfold in a little more than the last decade, you're on the right track. So before we close this part of the session, I thought we might like to give the audience an opportunity to just ask a question or two. We have just a few minutes left. If not, I've got one or two more. Yes, sir.
Maybe I didn't follow. What kind of protection we can provide, or what?
So you're talking about protection for investors who invest in the market where the company is listed, right? Right. So I'll go first because I think it's been, look, we have the good fortune of still being the broadest and deepest capital market in the world. We've got, of the few thousand listings we have here, 500 or 600 of the listings are from outside of the United States, and a number of them, a couple of hundred, are from what we would call the BRIC countries, right? Now, a lot of those, as the gentleman's question hinted at, we have nearly 100 companies from China listed here, and we were having reasonably good success. These companies were passing muster with the rules and regulations that we have. Remember, we can only go so far as an exchange. I think we hope that the combination of the listing standards, the auditing process, the legal process, the IPO process, et cetera, that combination of protections is meant to add up to one that makes it's the most difficult market to list in for a reason here in the US. Having said that, there have been a couple of instances where from companies in China, we had one from India a few years ago. Remember, go back 10 or 12 years, we had a couple in the US as well that were effectively not being run properly. They were effectively fraudulent operations. I think we have to be cautious that with the thousands of companies listed, that we not overreact either. Investor protection is paramount, but if we've got a handful of companies, a fraction of 1% that are managing to somehow skirt the rules and skirt the processes, we have to pay close attention when that happens and take action in the wake of those discoveries. But let's also make sure that the standards are still overall the highest in the world. So I think the same set of rules we apply for countries from the US or other countries. We don't make it any easier for companies outside of the US to list here than we do for companies in the US. And we're pretty proud that at least to the degree we can have the highest listing standard in the world, we can do that. Having said that, we're not an auditor, we're not a lawyer, we're not a banker either. So hopefully that addresses the question. Anything you want to add?
Well, I don't know how it's accepted here in the States, but in Russia, once a company wants to be listed in New York Stock Exchange, it looks like the top level of security, because the rules are very strict, and if you want to get access to the liquidity and capital, I wouldn't say that in other countries and in other stock exchanges they are not miserable. No, they are very strict as well. But people know. I don't know whether it's true or not, and lawyers now says that they say that it's changing. But people understand that the strictest rule are imposed here in New York. And once you list your company here, then you provide more protection for all the investors. Failures, unfortunately, happen, and I think they will happen everywhere, including New York Stock Exchange, London, Moscow, Frankfurt, elsewhere, but passing this way and dealing with New York Stock Exchange, I think that's a real way to promote security.
Yep. Sir. Anybody else? Yes, I think you had a question, sir. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I welcome the comments about trying to reduce corruption and anti-fraud forces in Russia. Anything you could say about the Magnitsky Act in the U.S. and that whole story around that?
Because there are a lot of mass media here, I would refrain from we understand that your Senate is working on it, and the bill was passed in the House of Representatives, and so we expect that it will be passed and maybe then signed by the president. And as you know, official reaction that Russia is preparing something as a response, and I would stop it here. I would just add, once we're here surrounded by business people, that I hope that for business people it will mean nothing. And maybe it will affect a few officials and something, but for those who are involved in business practices and they want to promote mutual trade, there will be not effect. So it's more political side of our common life. And that's it. That's not business.
All right. On behalf of everybody here, I just wanted to say thank you for spending the time with us today, and we look forward to many future Russia days here at the NYSE. So thank you very much.